Adrian Cole was a man who seemed born for the spotlight. At 40, he was already a millionaire with investments sprawled across real estate, tech ventures, and luxury imports. His name appeared in glossy magazines, his face framed under golden light at fundraisers, charity galas, and exclusive dinners, where the wealthy congratulated themselves for being untouchable. To the public, he was charm incarnate, every smile practiced, every gesture smooth, every word calculated to inspire envy and admiration. Behind closed doors, however, Adrian's brilliance dulled into something far colder. He wasn't cruel in ways that left bruises. His cruelty was quieter, more deliberate. It thrived in silences, in dismissive looks, in words sharpened to cut. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Evelyn, his wife, had once believed she mattered in his orbit. She had clung to him in the early years, mistaking his confidence for security, his arrogance for strength. Now she existed as an accessory to his image, a shadow forced to move when he moved, smile when he smiled. At a dinner party one evening, Adrian held court at the head of the table, glass of wine in hand, eyes glowing under chandelier light. Businessmen leaned closer when he spoke, their wives stealing glances that mixed admiration with envy. Adrian loved this, feeding on the validation, basking in the myth of his perfection. Across the table, Evelyn sat quietly, her hand resting on the stem of her untouched glass. She was beautiful still, though in a quieter, softer way that had grown with time. Her elegance was natural, not manufactured. But when Adrian's gaze briefly met hers, his eyes were flat, almost irritated, as if her presence threatened to disrupt the performance. "You're too quiet tonight, Evelyn," one of the wives said gently. Before Evelyn could answer, Adrian's voice sliced in. "She prefers to listen. It's one of her more endearing traits." The table laughed. Evelyn smiled thinly, lowering her eyes. Inside, she felt the familiar sting, a reminder that her voice had been stripped from her piece by piece, until silence became survival. Later that night, in the privacy of their mansion, Adrian stood by the mirror, unbuttoning his cufflinks with practiced ease. His reflection pleased him. Strong jawline, tailored suit, the gleam of success. Evelyn lingered by the door, hesitant. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said without looking at her. Her brows knit. "I didn't say a word." "Exactly." He turned, voice cold. "A wife in my position should compliment me, not fade into the background like a piece of furniture." Evelyn swallowed the retort rising in her throat. She had learned arguments never ended in her favor. He would twist her words, mock her tone, insist she was imagining things. Gaslighting had become his favorite sport. The bedroom fell silent except for the rustle of his shirt sliding from his shoulders. Evelyn retreated into herself, staring at the man she had once loved. She wondered when admiration had curdled into fear, when love had transformed into endurance. Adrian, meanwhile, felt no weight of doubt. To him, Evelyn was no longer a partner but an obligation, a tether he longed to cut. He had mastered the art of smiling at her in public while calculating her irrelevance in private. She would never leave. He knew that. She was too dependent, too afraid. Or so he thought. Outside their window, the city shimmered with promise, neon lights dancing across polished glass towers. Adrian exhaled, already thinking of his next conquest. His next headline, his next chance to prove he was untouchable. Evelyn lay awake in the dark, her hand brushing across her stomach, though she didn't yet understand why she felt so heavy, so different. Something was changing inside her, something he hadn't noticed, and though she didn't yet know it, that change would soon become the crack in Adrian's perfect facade, the beginning of everything he could not control. The days that followed Adrian's glittering dinner party settled into a pattern of quiet unease. Evelyn had grown used to carrying secrets in silence, but this one weighed heavier than any before. The missed cycles, the nausea at dawn, the trembling certainty that something within her was growing. She had bought the test in secret, hidden it in the drawer of the guest bathroom, and when the result appeared in stark lines of truth, she pressed her hand to her lips and cried, not from fear but from a fragile, desperate hope. She waited for the right moment to tell him, though with Adrian there was never a right moment. Every hour of his day was carved into schedules and appearances. He was home less often than not, and when he was, he carried the sharp edge of exhaustion disguised as superiority. Still, she rehearsed the words in her mind. We're having a child. Your child. One night, as thunder rolled over the city and rain began tapping at the tall glass windows of their bedroom, Evelyn found the courage. Adrian sat at the desk scanning through reports, his suit jacket draped neatly over the chair. The room smelled of expensive cologne and ink. She approached carefully, her voice almost a whisper. Adrian, I'm pregnant. For a brief second, silence hung, broken only by the sound of rain. He looked up, blinking once, his expression unreadable. Then came the faintest smile, sharp, dismissive. Pregnant. He repeated the word as if it were distasteful. And this is supposed to be good news? Evelyn's heart squeezed. It's our family, Adrian. Our chance, he interrupted with a low chuckle, pushing the papers aside. Do you have any idea what timing means in business? I'm finalizing a merger, dealing with the press, arranging appearances. And you think waddling into boardrooms with a pregnant wife is what I need right now? Her voice cracked. I'm not a burden. This is your child. His eyes hardened, voice lowering to a cutting calm. You've misunderstood your role here. You are meant to stand beside me to make me look untouchable. Children complicate that image. Do you want whispers? Headlines about a distracted husband? Investors second-guessing my focus? Tears welled in her eyes, but he leaned back, smirking, as if he had already won the argument. His words turned crueler with each syllable. You've always been fragile, Evelyn. Overly emotional. This mistake you're carrying will only expose that weakness. Don't call it a mistake. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. This is a life. Adrian rose from the chair slowly, his shadow falling across her. He placed a hand on her cheek, but the gesture was hollow, mocking tenderness. You'll thank me one day, he murmured. I'll set you up somewhere quiet, away from the press, away from me. You can nurse your little fantasy of motherhood, and I'll continue to protect the Cole legacy. Everyone wins. She flinched under his touch, realizing what he was saying. You're sending me away? I'm banishing you, Evelyn. For your own good, for mine. Consider it an act of mercy. The words landed like blows. She stared at him, searching for the man she had once loved. But there was nothing left, only a polished shell, hollow and gleaming. That night, as the storm raged outside, Evelyn packed what little she could carry. Adrian didn't offer to help. He didn't even watch as she pulled her suitcase down the grand staircase of the mansion. He simply poured himself another drink, the crystal glass catching flashes of lightning, and muttered, Don't make a scene. When she stepped out the door, rain drenched her instantly. The night was cold, the street empty, her body trembling from both the storm and the life inside her. She clutched her coat tighter across her stomach, whispering a promise to the child no one else wanted. You are not a mistake. You are mine. The gates of the Cole mansion closed behind her with a metallic clang that echoed in her chest. Evelyn turned away, walking into the rain with unbearable humiliation burning in her veins. She did not look back. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and fear, a seed of defiance was planted, and though Adrian could not see it, that seed would grow into the very thing that would one day shatter his empire. The apartment Evelyn found was nothing like the mansion she had left behind. It was small, its walls thin enough to hear footsteps above and arguments through the hall. Yet within its modest silence there was a kind of freedom, raw, unpolished, and terrifying. For the first time in years, she no longer lived in Adrian's shadow. But she also no longer had protection, security, or certainty. Only her child and her resolve. Pregnancy was not gentle with her. Each morning came with sickness, exhaustion, and aching loneliness. She would sit by the window, her hand on her growing belly, watching people rush by on the wet streets below. Couples laughed, umbrellas tilted together against the rain, and she wondered if they knew how fragile their happiness really was. Adrian's voice haunted her. Fragile, emotional, a mistake. His words repeated like a poison she could not flush from her mind. Nights were the worst, when silence deepened and memories surged like waves. The flashbacks came unbidden. The night she discovered him exchanging messages with another woman, his phone lighting up in the dark. When she confronted him, he had smiled, unashamed. You're overreacting. Men of my status have options, he had said, as though faithfulness were beneath him. Or the time at a gala when she overheard him boasting to a colleague, Evelyn was useful once. Now she's just there. He said it with the same tone he used to describe outdated furniture. Each memory cut deeper than the last, but Evelyn forced herself to keep breathing, to keep carrying the life inside her. The child was her anchor, the only thing keeping her from collapsing entirely. It was during one of those bleak afternoons that Cassandra appeared. Evelyn hadn't seen her old friend in months. Cassandra knocked softly, holding a paper bag of groceries, her smile carefully measured. "You look pale," Cassandra said, stepping into the dim apartment. "You're not eating enough, are you?" Evelyn tried to smile. Food doesn't always stay down. Cassandra unpacked bread, fruit, and tea, her movements brisk, almost rehearsed. Evelyn watched her, gratitude mixing with suspicion. There was something in Cassandra's eyes, something restrained, as though she were holding back words she couldn't speak. "I heard about Adrian," Cassandra said finally, her voice low. "People are already whispering. He's been seen with her." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Her? The woman from the firm, blonde, younger. He doesn't hide it anymore." Cassandra's tone was sharp, almost angry. "I don't know how he sleeps at night." Evelyn lowered her gaze to her hands, pale and trembling. She wasn't surprised. Adrian's betrayals were endless. Still, hearing it spoken aloud felt like being pushed into cold water. Cassandra reached across the table, her hand warm against Evelyn's. "You deserve better than him. Don't ever believe his lies." For a moment, Evelyn felt strength in that touch, but then she noticed the hesitation in Cassandra's eyes, the way her friend's gaze flickered away as though hiding something. Evelyn wanted to ask, wanted to pry open the silence, but exhaustion pressed her down. "Instead," she whispered, "thank you for being here." Cassandra nodded, though her silence lingered like a shadow. That night, Evelyn lay in bed, the city lights flickering through the curtains. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of traffic. She thought of Adrian with his new woman, laughing in the places she once sat, whispering in the darkness where she had once believed she belonged. A silent betrayal was worse than the loudest fight. It gnawed at her in places she couldn't mend. Yet as she turned on her side, her hand on her growing stomach, she whispered to her unborn child, "You are the only truth I have left. And one day he'll see you. He'll have to." The vow echoed in the room, fragile but unbroken. Outside, rain began again, steady and relentless, as though the world itself understood her pain. And though Evelyn did not yet know it, Cassandra's hesitation held its own secret, one that would resurface at the worst possible moment, adding another fracture to the story Adrian thought he controlled. The months passed with slow, grinding weight. Evelyn's body changed faster than her heart could keep up with, her loneliness deepening as her stomach grew heavy. She had no one but Cassandra dropping by now and then, and even Cassandra's presence carried that same unspoken hesitation. Still, Evelyn clung to the one truth that remained unshakable. She was not alone. Life moved within her, kicking against the silence. By the 8th month, the pain became sharper, unrelenting. She told herself it was normal, that she could endure. But one stormy evening, as she clutched the kitchen counter, the first contraction tore through her like fire. The grocery bag she held dropped, apples rolling across the floor. Breathless, she grabbed her coat, whispering to herself, "It's time." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Nurses wheeled her down long, fluorescent-lit corridors, their voices brisk, professional, already assessing the complications of her labor. Evelyn heard words, multiple heartbeats, unusual readings. "Prepare for emergency delivery." Panic filled her chest. She had expected one child, perhaps two at most. The thought that more lives were inside her was overwhelming. Hours blurred into each other under the sharp glare of surgical lamps. Sweat drenched her skin as she gripped the rails of the bed, her cries drowned by the orders of doctors. Then at last the silence of the sterile room shattered. One cry, then another, and finally a fourth. 4 distinct voices rising into the night, their fragile lungs breaking the air with defiance. Evelyn turned her head weakly, eyes filling with tears. 4 tiny forms were wrapped in blankets brought forward by careful hands. She reached out, trembling, as nurses placed them in her arms one by one. Her heart nearly broke under the weight of it. 4 children. 4 sons, each with features that stole her breath away. The same eyes, the same sharp jawlines. Adrian's bloodline written so boldly in their faces that denial would be impossible. Evelyn wept, kissing their damp foreheads. "You're mine," she whispered, her voice hoarse. All of you. Mine. The hospital room was cold, its walls bare, its hum of machines indifferent. But within Evelyn's arms, warmth bloomed, 4 little lives breathing in sync, their cries fading into soft sighs as they pressed against her. Across the city, Adrian was nowhere near that sterile room. He sat in a velvet booth of an exclusive restaurant, laughter echoing around him. The woman at his side, the blonde Cassandra had spoken of, clinked her glass against his. Cameras weren't allowed here, but Adrian didn't need them tonight. His smile, his arm draped casually around the younger woman, his boastful stories about new ventures. This was his kingdom. When she leaned close to whisper something in his ear, Adrian's grin widened. To him, Evelyn was a chapter already closed, a burden conveniently erased from the public eye. He had no idea that at that very moment, 4 infants bearing his unmistakable features were breathing their first breaths. Back at the hospital, Evelyn lay exhausted, her body trembling with both pain and awe. She stared at them, identical, fragile, and yet impossibly strong. For the first time in months, hope pushed back against despair. She was not alone anymore. Her children were proof, living and undeniable, that Adrian had not destroyed her. But the nurses whispered among themselves. Quadruplets were rare, difficult, risky. Evelyn overheard fragments about bills, about the strain of raising them alone. Her relief was cut with fear. How would she provide? How could she shield them from the shadow of their father? As the first night closed in, she sat upright despite her weakness, cradling them close. The city outside glittered through rain-soaked windows, 1,000 lights mocking her isolation. Still she whispered promises into the night. I will not fail you. I will not let him erase you. You are not his shame. You are my truth. One stirred, eyes opening briefly, tiny fingers curling around hers. The resemblance was undeniable. The line of the jaw, the storm-gray eyes. Adrian lived in them whether he wanted to or not. And Evelyn knew then that one day, perhaps not soon, but inevitably he would have to face them. For now, the world was quiet except for the rhythm of 4 soft breaths. Yet beneath the fragile peace, Evelyn felt something shifting. Her children were not only her hope, they were her weapon, her evidence, her vengeance waiting to unfold. The night ended not with silence, but with 4 tiny cries echoing against hospital walls, each one a declaration of survival. And while Adrian basked in laughter and luxury, Evelyn's vow hardened. One day she would bring these children into his world of chandeliers and champagne, and the illusion of his perfect life would shatter like glass. Time has a way of dulling some wounds, but not the kind Adrian Cole left behind. Years slipped past, measured not in peace but in the rhythm of sleepless nights, scraped knees and 4 voices calling for her attention all at once. Evelyn's life had become a constant juggling act. Work, rent, food, and the unending demands of raising quadruplets. Yet in their laughter, in the way they clung to her, she found a strength she never believed she possessed. Her boys grew quickly, each with their own quirks, one stubborn, one timid, one endlessly curious, and one with a quiet intensity that often reminded her of Adrian. She tried not to see him in their faces, but it was impossible. The same jawlines, the same piercing gray eyes. They were his legacy, and also her salvation. Then, one late afternoon, the letter arrived. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold edges. At first she thought it was a mistake, something meant for someone else. But when she tore it open with shaking fingers, her breath caught. Inside lay a wedding invitation. Adrian Cole requests the honor of your presence. Her vision blurred. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the elegant script. Adrian was remarrying. A diamond-studded performance of power and perfection, broadcast to the same society that had once applauded their union. Anger rose like bile, bitter and hot. How easily he moved forward, as though she and their children were nothing more than discarded footnotes in his story. The boys noticed her silence. "Mom," one of them asked softly, tugging at her sleeve. She folded the invitation quickly, slipping it back into the envelope before their eyes could catch the truth. But all night the words burned in her chest. Sleep abandoned her. She sat by the window long after the boys were asleep, the city lights glowing against the glass. Adrian's voice echoed in her memory, the cold dismissal, the smirk when he sent her away, the cruel certainty that she was replaceable. And now, Here it was in ink, proof that he intended to erase her completely. But something inside Evelyn shifted that night. Not despair, not fear, something harder, sharper. Rage laced with resolve. For years she had lived in silence, hidden from his world. But her children were not mistakes. They were truth embodied, walking proof of his lies. And perhaps it was time the world saw them. The next morning she studied the invitation again, her hands steady now. She thought of the chandeliers, the red carpet, the endless cameras that would be there to capture Adrian's grand performance. She thought of the guests whispering in admiration, the bride glowing at his side, and then she thought of her 4 sons, his sons, standing together in matching suits, a living mirror of the man who tried to deny them. Her decision crystallized. She would go, not alone, not hidden. She would walk into that room with her children beside her, let them whisper, let the cameras flash. Let Adrian's carefully constructed empire crack under the weight of undeniable truth. Cassandra visited later that week, dropping off groceries as usual. Evelyn showed her the invitation. Cassandra's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're not actually considering going?" "I am," Evelyn said, her tone steady. "He doesn't get to erase us." Cassandra hesitated, her gaze troubled. "Evelyn, this could ruin you." "That world, it eats people alive," Evelyn met her eyes. "It already tried. I survived. Now it's his turn." That night after Cassandra left, Evelyn laid out her son's best clothes. Polished shoes, crisp shirts, perfectly tailored jackets. She ran her hand over the fabric, imagining them standing tall, heads lifted. This was no longer about humiliation or revenge. It was about truth. About standing in the same golden light Adrian worshipped and refusing to disappear. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her mind already on the day to come. The diamond invitation lay on the table, gleaming under the dim lamp. Soon it would no longer symbolize Adrian's triumph. It would mark the beginning of his undoing. The morning of the wedding dawned gray, the city cloaked in a quiet haze that promised rain. Evelyn awoke before her sons, her heart pounding with the steady rhythm of inevitability. For years she had dreamed of confronting Adrian, but not like this, not on the stage he had built for himself. Yet today the choice was no longer hers. The invitation had demanded her silence. Her answer would be her presence. She stood at the mirror, fastening the pearl buttons on her black dress. It wasn't new or extravagant, but it carried dignity, an elegance that spoke without words. Her hair, pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, framed a face both hardened and softened by years of survival. Behind her eyes lingered exhaustion, but also an unshakable fire. When she turned, 4 pairs of eyes watched her sleepily from their beds. Her boys, her strength, her living truth. Each one so alike and yet so different, a reminder that miracles sometimes came disguised as burdens. "Up, boys," she said gently. "We've got somewhere important to be." They stirred, stretching and yawning, their innocence still wrapped around them like a blanket. None of them yet understood the weight of the day ahead. To them it was just another morning. Another chance to stay close to the mother who had carried their world on her shoulders. Evelyn laid out the outfits she had prepared with meticulous care. Matching charcoal gray suits, polished shoes lined neatly, crisp white shirts and slender black ties. Each detail mattered. They would not arrive as shadows or afterthoughts. They would arrive as a statement. One by one she dressed them, smoothing collars, fastening buttons, kneeling to tie shoelaces with hands that trembled only slightly. She brushed their hair, combing it until it gleamed under the pale light. Her boys laughed softly at her fussing, teasing each other in whispers. Their innocence struck her like a blade. How unaware they were that today they would become symbols in a war they never asked to fight. "Stand tall," she told them, guiding them to the mirror. "Always look people in the eye. Never be ashamed of who you are." They obeyed, straightening, their reflections multiplying against the glass. 4 young boys, nearly identical. The unmistakable stamp of Adrian Cole carved into their features. Evelyn's throat tightened. She saw Adrian in them, the jawline, the eyes. But she also saw herself in their stubborn chins, their quiet determination. The sound of polished shoes on wooden floorboards filled the small apartment as the boys practiced walking side by side. She adjusted their ties, brushed lint from their sleeves, and then stepped back, her chest swelling with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You look perfect," she whispered, perfect enough to bring the truth into any room. For a moment, tenderness washed over her. She wanted to hold them all, to shield them from what was coming. But then she remembered Adrian's voice, the way he had dismissed her, erased them before they had even drawn breath. The tenderness shifted, sharpened into steel. She pulled the folded invitation from the drawer, the gold embossing glinting faintly in the morning light. Her fingers tightened around it. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a battlefield. As she gathered her sons and helped them into their coats, Evelyn's resolve hardened. She wasn't simply attending Adrian's celebration. She was marching into his carefully built empire with the very proof of his betrayal walking beside her. When they stepped outside, the air was cool and damp, the sky heavy with clouds. Evelyn locked the door of the small apartment behind her and turned toward the waiting taxi. The boys climbed in, excitement lighting their faces. To them, it was an adventure. To her, it was war. As the city blurred past the windows, Evelyn pressed her hand over her lap, steadying herself. She whispered silently, not to the boys but to the storm gathering in her chest. This ends today. His perfect world breaks today. The car turned toward the glittering avenue where the wedding was set. The sound of church bells rang faintly in the distance. Evelyn lifted her chin, her sons beside her like soldiers in miniature suits, and prepared for the moment that would shatter Adrian Cole's illusion forever. The church stood like a cathedral of light, its marble pillars rising into the gray sky, chandeliers glowing through arched windows. Outside, velvet ropes framed the red carpet where flashes from cameras painted the scene in bursts of white. Limousines pulled up one after another, releasing politicians, actors, and titans of business in glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. It wasn't a wedding, it was a spectacle, staged with the precision of a royal coronation. At the center of it all was Adrian Cole. His jawline was sharp as ever, his custom-tailored suit catching the light with quiet arrogance. At his side, his bride-to-be, Serena Vale, glowed in a diamond-laced gown, her smile wide, rehearsed for the cameras. Together, they looked untouchable, an empire sealed in silk and gold. Reporters called out questions, flashes cascading like waves. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to be marrying again?" Adrian raised his hand in a practiced gesture, the corner of his mouth curling into the smile that had charmed boardrooms and broken women alike. "It feels," he said smoothly, "like destiny." Inside the grand hall, music swelled from a string quartet. Guests murmured with awe as the couple made their way up the aisle, basking in admiration. It was the image Adrian had always craved, perfection framed in crystal and candlelight. But just as the ceremony was about to begin, the rhythm of the day shifted. Outside, a black taxi pulled to the curb, its plainness almost jarring against the gleaming parade of limousines. The door opened slowly, and 5 figures stepped out. Evelyn was the first. Her black dress clung to her frame with quiet elegance, her hair pinned neatly, her posture straight as steel. She took a breath and turned to help her sons. One by one, the boys emerged, 4 near mirrors of each other, their suits sharp, shoes gleaming, ties perfectly knotted. Their faces, though young, carried a haunting familiarity. The crowd of photographers faltered, their lenses lowering for a moment in stunned recognition. Then, as realization spread, shutters clicked with renewed ferocity. Gasps rippled like a wave through the crowd. They look just like him," someone whispered. The boys stood at Evelyn's side, heads lifted, eyes steady. Their resemblance to Adrian was undeniable. The same storm-gray eyes, the same angular features. It was as though Adrian himself had been split into 4, his arrogance reborn in miniature forms. Evelyn walked forward, her heels clicking against the stone path of the red carpet. Each step echoed louder than the last, her sons keeping pace beside her. She did not flinch beneath the flashes of cameras. She did not lower her eyes. She walked with the grace of a woman who had been silenced and had chosen finally to speak without words. Inside the hall, whispers began as the guests noticed the stir at the entrance. The music faltered slightly, boughs trembling against strings as heads turned. The great double doors creaked open and Evelyn appeared in the frame, bathed in golden light from the chandeliers above. For a moment, silence held the room captive. All eyes shifted from the radiant bride and the smug groom to the figure at the entrance and the 4 boys at her side. Adrian froze. His smile collapsed, his hand tightening on Serena's arm until she winced. The color drained from his face as his gaze locked on the children. Whispers sharpened into murmurs. They look just like him. Are those quadruplets? Serena's eyes widened, her grip tightening on Adrian's sleeve. Adrian, she hissed under her breath. Who are they? Evelyn's voice did not need to rise above the music. Her presence alone carried. She stepped further into the room, her sons aligned in perfect formation, their faces mirrors of the man who had cast them aside. The whispers became a storm. Cameras turned from the bride's diamonds to the children's storm-gray eyes. Society's golden image of Adrian Cole trembled. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the aisle, lifting her chin, her gaze fixed on Adrian. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her son stood as the loudest declaration of betrayal ever made. Adrian's carefully constructed empire had cracked in an instant. And the ceremony, meant to seal his new beginning, now teetered on the edge of ruin. Evelyn's boys glanced at her, uncertain but trusting, their hands brushing hers. She gave the slightest nod, her lips curving into the faintest whisper of a smile. The storm had only begun. The weight of the silence inside the cathedral was unbearable. Whispers curled through the pews like smoke, growing louder, sharper, feeding on the undeniable truth standing at the back of the aisle. Evelyn and her 4 sons stood unmoving, their presence a mirror that cracked Adrian Cole's polished facade. Serena Vale's smile faltered. Only moments before she had been radiant, the center of every camera flash, the envy of every woman in the room. Now her lips trembled, her face paling under the chandelier's glow. She could feel eyes stabbing into her back, dissecting her in real time, the glamorous new bride. The fool, the replacement. Her grip tightened on Adrian's arm. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like," she hissed, her voice razor-thin. Adrian forced a smile, one hand lifting as though he could silence the entire crowd with a single gesture. But his eyes betrayed him, flicking nervously toward Evelyn and the boys. The resemblance was too striking, too perfect. Even his arrogance could not bend this truth. Guests shifted uneasily. A senator's wife leaned close to her husband. "They're his," she whispered. "You can see it." Cameras hidden among the crowd captured every twitch, every glance, every fracture in the illusion. Serena's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. The humiliation was suffocating. She had believed Adrian's every promise, that Evelyn was a weak, hysterical woman clinging to lies, that the past had been erased. Yet here Evelyn stood unbroken, flanked by living proof. "You lied to me," Serena snapped, her voice low but venomous. Adrian turned sharply. "Not here. Not now." But Evelyn stepped forward, her heels striking the marble with deliberate force. She met Serena's eyes, calm, unwavering. "I didn't come to ruin your wedding," Evelyn said softly, though her words cut like glass. "I came to remind him, and all of you, what he tried to erase." Gasps echoed. The boys stood taller, their eyes steady on Adrian. Serena's composure cracked. She turned to the crowd, her voice rising in shrill panic. "This is a stunt. Some desperate attempt to—" She stopped, choking on her own words as the boys' faces turned toward her in unison. The resemblance was undeniable. "They are his," someone muttered. "All of them." Serena's eyes burned with humiliation. "You planned this," she spat at Adrian, trembling with rage. "You let me stand here dressed in white while they—" Her voice broke and the mask of the poised heiress dissolved. Adrian's jaw tightened, but for once he had no words. His silence was its own confession, the tension snapped. Serena shoved his arm away, diamonds flashing under the chandeliers as she stepped back. "You made me a spectacle," she said bitterly, her voice carrying through the cathedral. "You promised me perfection, Adrian. Instead, you gave me this circus." Her words echoed, bouncing against stone walls, filling every corner of the hall. The crowd erupted into whispers and sharp intakes of breath. Evelyn, still calm, placed a hand on her son's shoulders. "I didn't make this circus," she said, her gaze fixed on Adrian. "He did." The statement landed like a verdict. Serena's eyes brimmed with tears, though they glittered with fury more than grief. She turned on Adrian, her voice sharp enough to slice through the murmurs. "How long were you going to hide them? Until after the wedding? Until after I gave you children of my own? How many lies have you built your empire on?" Adrian's silence stretched unbearable. He reached for her hand, but she recoiled, her disgust plain. "Don't touch me," she spat, her voice breaking. The cameras caught it all. The bride unraveling, the groom frozen, the wife standing unbroken. Evelyn did not gloat. She simply stood her ground, the storm around her only proof of her resolve. Her presence alone had accomplished what she intended. Serena's unraveling. Adrian's exposure, the truth crashing down like shattered glass. Serena finally turned, her gown sweeping behind her as she fled down the aisle, the crowd parting around her like water. The great doors slammed shut after her, their echo reverberating through the cathedral like a final note of judgment. Evelyn looked once more at Adrian, her expression unreadable. The whispers grew into a roar, and in that moment Adrian's empire, built on lies and appearances, wavered, on the brink of collapse, and Evelyn knew this was only the beginning. The cathedral still trembled, from the echo of the doors slamming behind Serena Vale. Guests shifted uneasily in their seats, whispers crackling through the hall like wildfire. The ceremony was broken, shattered into fragments of scandal, and all eyes turned to the man at the center of it, Adrian Cole. For a fleeting moment, Adrian tried to recover. He straightened his shoulders, forced his lips into the familiar curve of his practiced smile, and raised his hand as though he could control the chaos with a simple gesture. But the mask was slipping. Sweat glistened at his temple, his jaw clenched too tightly. Evelyn watched him, her expression calm but resolute. She had seen this look before, the desperate scramble for control, the arrogance that believed the world could be bent to his will. But today he was no longer untouchable. From the small clutch she carried, Evelyn withdrew a sealed envelope. Its plainness contrasted violently with the grandeur around her. No gold trim, no embossed crest, just stark white paper with a single truth hidden inside. Cameras swung toward her, the crowd holding its collective breath. She stepped forward, her heels sharp against the marble, her sons aligned behind her like silent sentinels. "Adrian," she said, her voice steady, amplified by the silence. "You can dismiss me. You can dismiss our years together. But you cannot dismiss them." She gestured toward the boys. "And if resemblance is not enough for you or for anyone else, then I came prepared." She held the envelope high. The guests craned their necks, their whispers colliding into a frenzy. Adrian's face blanched. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice low, dangerous. Evelyn's gaze did not waver. "The truth you've tried to bury. DNA results. Proof that each of these boys is yours. Proof that no lie, no mistress, no empire can erase them." The flash of cameras erupted again, blinding in their ferocity. Guests gasped audibly. Some clutched their pearls, others leaned forward in anticipation. The scent of scandal was intoxicating. Adrian's smile faltered completely. He stepped forward, his hand reaching out as if to snatch the envelope away. "This is a stunt," he snapped, his voice rising. "An act of desperation. She forged this," but his words rang hollow. The guests had already seen enough. The children's resemblance, his shaken composure, Serena's flight. Evelyn pulled the envelope back, her movements precise, deliberate. "I had these tests done years ago, quietly, carefully, with signatures and seals from the best laboratories in the country. You may silence me, Adrian, but you will not silence science." The envelope trembled in the air like a gavel about to fall. The boys stood quietly behind her, their eyes wide, yet steady. They didn't fully understand the words being thrown across the cathedral, but they understood their mother's strength. They understood that today was not just hers, but theirs. Adrian turned to the crowd, desperation sharpening his tone. "Don't believe this. She's bitter. But the murmurs drowned him out. Look at the children. They're his. They must be. And the DNA. His empire, once untouchable, was crumbling under the weight of undeniable truth." Evelyn lowered the envelope slightly, her voice quiet but cutting enough to carry. "You've spent years perfecting your lies, Adrian, but lies only survive until the truth walks into the room. And today, truth has 4 faces." A sharp gasp rippled through the hall. Adrian's hand shook. He tried to laugh, to dismiss her with the arrogance that had always worked before. But the cameras were on him now, capturing the tremor in his jaw, the panic in his eyes. No charm could save him. From the back of the hall, a voice called out, "Show us the papers." The chant spread, guests demanding, pressing, hungry for the spectacle to unfold. Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest smile. She did not open the envelope. She didn't need to. The moment had already achieved its purpose. The seed of doubt had grown into full exposure, and Adrian's denial collapsed under its weight. As she turned slowly, holding the envelope firmly in hand, Serena's muffled sobs echoed faintly from beyond the great doors. The mistress had fled in tears. Her dreams of glittering perfection dissolved into scandal. Evelyn glanced back at Adrian one last time. His face was a portrait of rage and unraveling pride, the kind of downfall that begins not with a crash, but with a crack too loud to ignore, and with that, she took her son's hands and led them forward down the aisle, not as intruders, but as heirs to the truth Adrian could no longer deny. The cathedral was still buzzing when Evelyn walked out into the damp afternoon air, her sons clustered close at her sides. The flashes of cameras followed her like lightning, reporters shouting questions, microphones thrust forward. The scandal was no longer confined within marble walls. It had spilled into the streets, and by morning it would ignite the world. By nightfall, headlines blazed across every screen. Millionaire's secret children revealed at his own wedding. Quadruplets shock high society DNA. Envelope raises questions. Serena Vale flees ceremony in tears. Television anchors dissected every angle, their voices laced with both outrage and delight. Tabloid journalists debated Evelyn's motives. Was she the embodiment of justice or a woman hungry for vengeance? Talk shows aired split screens, Adrian's frozen, pale expression on one side, Evelyn's steady, unflinching gaze on the other. For Adrian, the fallout was immediate. Investors withdrew, shares in his companies plummeted, and contracts that once clung to his name dissolved overnight. Photographers stalked him, recording each stumble, each crack in his armor. The man who had once dictated the narrative now found himself devoured by it. Evelyn, meanwhile, became an enigma. Some praised her as courageous, a mother refusing to let her children live as shadows. Others whispered that she had staged it, carefully timed for maximum humiliation. Either way, she was no longer invisible. She was a name, a force. One evening, as rain beat against the window of a rented hotel room, Adrian arrived unannounced. His suit was rumpled, his tie gone, his hair disheveled for the first time Evelyn had ever seen. The children were asleep in the adjoining room, their soft breaths a fragile reminder of innocence untouched by the storm. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hall light. "You've destroyed me," he said, his voice low and ragged. Evelyn didn't flinch. She set aside the tea she was holding and looked at him steadily. "No," she replied. "You destroyed yourself." His jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "The papers, the investors, my entire empire is bleeding because of you." Her lips curved in something between a smile and sorrow. "I wasn't trying to ruin you. You did that yourself." The words landed like a blade. Adrian stepped further into the room, his composure unraveling. "Do you think this makes you noble? Dragging our private life into the open? Turning my name into filth?" Evelyn's voice remained calm, measured. "I didn't drag anything. I walked in with our sons. You're the one who abandoned them. You're the one who lied. The truth was always going to surface, Adrian. You should know by now, lies rot in the dark, but they never die there." He stared at her, chest heaving, but no rebuttal came. For the first time, he seemed small, stripped of wealth, stripped of charm, stripped of power. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on his. "I never wanted revenge. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted my children to grow up knowing they weren't mistakes. If that truth ruins you, then maybe you were never worthy of the empire you built." The rain hammered harder against the glass, a drumbeat underscoring the silence between them. Finally, Adrian's shoulders sagged, his voice breaking. "They'll never forgive me." Evelyn's gaze softened, though her tone did not. "Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't mine to give or yours to demand. It's theirs. And you've already wasted the years when it mattered most." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, his expression fractured, before turning toward the door. His steps were heavy, his posture slumped. For a man who once lived to be photographed, he now fled the camera of her gaze. When the door closed behind him, Evelyn sat in silence. Her sons stirred faintly in the other room, one of them murmuring in sleep. She exhaled slowly, realizing that her confrontation with Adrian had sealed something deeper than his downfall. It had sealed her own strength. The world outside debated whether she was villain or heroine. But Evelyn no longer cared. She hadn't fought for their approval. She had fought for truth, and as the headlines continued to scream, she knew the battle for her children's future was not finished. The court of public opinion had turned, but Adrian Cole's final collapse was still to come. Adrian Cole had always believed that money could shield him from consequence. For years it had. Money bought silence, influence, loyalty, but after Evelyn's return and the storm she unleashed, the walls of his empire began to crumble faster than he could repair them. The first crack came from the markets. His investors, once eager to be associated with his brilliance, abandoned him overnight. Stocks plummeted, deals evaporated, contracts torn apart in backroom meetings. Banks pulled support, whispers of instability swelling into shouts. The second crack came from the courts. Reporters dug deeper, no longer charmed by his smirk or rehearsed answers. They unearthed old documents, shady partnerships, unpaid obligations. Lawsuits piled up. Fraud, breach of contract, failure to provide for dependents. Adrian found himself summoned to hearings where cameras waited eagerly outside the doors, capturing each weary step. The final crack came from within. His name, once a brand of power, became a punchline. Invitations dried up, friends disappeared, and even Serena, still nursing her humiliation, was seen publicly denouncing him. He had gone from admired to infamous, from untouchable to radioactive. In the quiet of his penthouse, Adrian stood by the vast windows, staring out at the city skyline. The glass reflected a hollow man, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his once commanding posture reduced to slumped defeat. He lifted a tumbler of whiskey, but even that comfort failed him. His empire had shattered, and he had no one left to blame but himself. Meanwhile, Evelyn walked a different path. Though scarred by years of silence and struggle, she carried herself with a steadiness born of survival. She no longer wore the heavy shame he had draped on her shoulders. Instead, she wore resilience. Her sons walked beside her, growing taller by the day, their laughter filling the small apartment she had once thought of as a cage. Now it felt like freedom. They were her world, her proof that endurance could become triumph. At the grocery store, people glanced at her differently. Some with admiration, some with curiosity, some with judgment. She had become a symbol, whether she wanted it or not. But Evelyn had stopped measuring herself by the world's opinion. She measured herself by the 4 faces she kissed goodnight. One evening, news blared from the television in the background. Adrian Cole had been indicted for fraud. Court dates loomed, assets frozen. His name splashed across every network with the same word: disgraced. Evelyn paused, her hand still on the dinner table, listening as the anchor's voice described the collapse. The boys looked up at her, confusion in their eyes. "Mom?" one asked softly. "Does this mean he's gone?" Evelyn thought for a long moment before answering. "No," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "It means he's learning. Sometimes losing everything is the only way a man sees who he really is." Her sons nodded slowly, accepting the answer even if they didn't fully understand it. Evelyn exhaled, her chest tight but not from grief, from release. Across town, Adrian sat in a courtroom stripped of his tailored armor, surrounded by lawyers who no longer smiled. The judge's gavel struck, echoing like the toll of a bell. His empire had not simply fallen, it had imploded, leaving him with nothing but the hollow memory of who he used to be. Evelyn, walking home with her sons, felt the weight of justice. It wasn't sweet, not really. It wasn't triumphant. Justice had cost her years of her life, endless tears and scars she would carry forever. But it had cost him more. Not just money, not just status. It had cost him pride, the one thing he valued above all. As she unlocked the door to their apartment, she smiled faintly at her sons. "We move forward now," she whispered. And for the first time in years, the words felt true. Adrian's villa stood silent on the hillside, its windows dark, its fountains dry. Once it had been the stage for glittering parties, its halls echoing with laughter and power. Now dust gathered on marble floors, the grand piano untouched, the champagne glasses tucked away like relics of another life. Adrian wandered its corridors alone, his footsteps hollow. The echo mocked him, reminding him of what he had lost. In the quiet, he replayed every headline, every betrayal exposed, every camera flash that captured his fall. He sat often in the study, staring at framed photographs of galas and handshakes with men who no longer returned his calls. His empire had been built on image, and without it, he was nothing. At night, he poured himself whiskey and watched the courtroom footage on repeat. Evelyn standing tall, the boys at her side, the envelope in her hand. He told himself he hated her, but deep down he knew what truly gnawed at him was not hatred, it was envy. She had something he had never possessed: truth. Across the city, Evelyn's life was far from perfect, but it was alive. Their apartment buzzed with energy. 4 boys growing into themselves with unstoppable force. They argued over chores, wrestled in the living room, spilled milk at the table. Yet in their noise, Evelyn found music. Each laugh, each hug, each sleepy "good night, Mom" was a reminder that she had not been defeated, she had endured. One Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains as Evelyn prepared breakfast. The boys crowded the table, still in their pajamas, hair tousled. She flipped pancakes, their chatter filling the kitchen. "Can I have the first one?" "No, me!" "Mom, he already got the bigger one yesterday." Evelyn laughed, handing out plates with mock sternness. "You'll all eat, I promise. No one goes hungry in this house." Their giggles rang out, and in that sound she felt the weight of years lifting. After breakfast, she took them to the park. The air was crisp, the sky wide and blue. She watched them run across the grass, their energy boundless, their faces lit with freedom. Parents glanced at her from nearby benches, some with curiosity, some with admiration. But she no longer lowered her gaze. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her heart steady. She had faced humiliation, betrayal, abandonment, and yet here she was, with 4 living testaments to her strength running ahead of her. She had not destroyed Adrian to find her dignity. She had reclaimed it by standing in truth, by refusing to be erased. That evening, when the boys were asleep, Evelyn tucked the blankets around them and lingered in the doorway. The soft sound of their breathing filled the room. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with quiet joy. In her bedroom, she opened the window and let the night air drift in. The city lights sparkled like stars, but she no longer yearned for the world Adrian had once ruled. She had built her own world, smaller perhaps, but filled with love and resilience. She whispered into the night as though speaking to Adrian, though he could no longer touch her life. "We were never your shame. We were always your truth. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from." The words settled like a benediction, closing one chapter and opening another. Back in his villa, Adrian sat in silence, staring at empty glasses and hollow rooms. The laughter he replayed in memory would never return. His downfall was complete, not in the courtroom, not in the headlines, but in the echoing solitude of a house stripped of joy. Evelyn, on the other hand, stood at her son's door once more, listening to their soft breaths. She touched the frame gently, her heart steady, her voice silent but sure. The past had scarred her, but the future was hers. And for the first time in years, Evelyn believed in beginnings.